Welcome to the Business of Biotech. On our last episode, multi-time biotech founder and board member Leslie Williams shared deep and practical insight into building your biopharma startup pitch, translating your pitch into a deck, and what to expect throughout the pitching experience. We touched on pitching strategies in a challenging economy, and today we're going much deeper on that topic with a founder who lived it when he launched his biotech back in 2008 in the throes of the Great Recession. Since that launch, he's continually cultivated capital to seed his company's growth, but he's also done some creative bootstrapping by leveraging his company's IP in a services context to fund the development of its pipeline. Let's give it a listen. I'm very much looking forward to today's conversation with Ben Zeskind, who is the co-founder and CEO of a company called Immuneering. And I'm looking forward to it because Ben's is a very unique company that I might wrongly, but I think sort of accurately classify as something of a hybrid between a bioinformatics company and a biotech or pharma company focused on gene therapies. And I'm excited about...
Just to clarify that, yeah. So therapy is discovered using genetic information, but not necessarily gene therapy.
Yes. Perfect. Thank you. So I'm excited to talk with Ben about his company, his experience, because today's conversation is going to focus on finding and, in Ben's case, even creating funding in a highly reactive market. And we're going to kind of cover the gamut of that because Ben launched his company back in 2008 when a lot of people said, don't do that, bad time. And he's got some good funding stories to tell along the way. So just before we get started, and I formally introduce Ben, who just popped in, I want to give you a little bit of background on him. So Ben is an MIT undergrad, just some bullet points. MIT undergrad in electrical engineering, computer science, MIT PhD in biological engineering, Harvard MBA, grad student and postdoctoral work at Whitehead Institute, launched Immuneering in 2008, as I said, not an ideal time. Just this past December, I believe, you landed a $19 million round of Series A financing, correct?
Ended up at 20. We were oversubscribed, so we finally closed it out at 20 million. Yeah.
Congratulations. And that funding, as I understand it, is designed to help you move forward with your lead program in cancer, cachexia, and its pipeline of oncology medicines, correct?
That's the primary use. Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. So also, what will make this conversation around funding interesting is that in addition to securing this outside funding, as I mentioned, Immuneering is a bioinformatics company. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Ben, but you guys license your bioinformatics platform to other companies and kind of do some self-funding via that revenue stream?
Close. So we provide services. So we provide bioinformatics services. So it's not really licensing our platform, but it's more providing sort of best in class services. So PhDs trained at MIT and the like who can come into pharma companies and help them analyze their bioinformatic data in more detail. So it's really a services business.
Excellent. Okay, cool. So we can talk about how that kind of contributes to your funding picture at Immuneering as well. So with that, a formal intro to the guy who's been popping in and correcting me, Ben Zeskind. Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So I want to start out, again, the focus of today's show is to talk a little bit about market dynamics on the funding scene for startup biotechs. And this is a big, broad question that you could take in a million different directions, but I'll ask it in an open-ended fashion. How does the market impact the biotech investment environment from your perspective?
Oh, well, it certainly has a dramatic impact on how companies get financed and when. And unfortunately, I learned this the hard way. So, as you had kindly mentioned in my introduction, I did a lot of school and sort of came out of these schools. I had a business plan written for Immuneering, and I thought it was pretty straightforward the way we learned it in school, right? You have your business plan, you go out, spend a few months, and raise capital from VCs, and then you're kind of off and running. And so it all seemed great in theory, and unfortunately that theory sort of ran into the buzzsaw of reality in 2008. So we actually made our first serious pitch to investors the week that Lehman Brothers collapsed.
Yeah.
It was kind of like where'd everybody go,
Yeah.
And just really, I think the biggest thing was psychology, right? When the markets are plummeting, and sort of everyone's scared, no one knows sort of where it's going to end, and so I think the VCs and other investors naturally, they're thinking about their existing portfolio and how they're going to probably have to spend more than they thought they would on to invest more in their existing portfolio to kind of keep them going through the difficult times. They're thinking about the next fund they have to raise, because don't forget VCs have to raise capital as well from their limited partners, and which are often large pension funds and state employee retirement funds and things like that. And if those are more constrained, VC firms can't raise a new fund, so they're sort of feeling squeezed in all those directions, and
Sure.
it just, I think, dramatically changes sort of their perception of risk and how they want to deploy their capital.
Yeah. So tell me about how when you face that situation, to your point, where you looked around and you're like, hey, where'd everybody go? It's 2008, right after Lehman Brothers collapses. How did that, and be as transparent as you're comfortable being, how did that affect your strategy? What mistakes did you make, and lessons did you learn as a result of making those mistakes at the time?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing we thought that was probably a mistake in retrospect. I'll say I instead of we. The first thing I thought that was a mistake was that this was a problem that could be overcome kind of solely by persistence. So we said, okay, sort of the first 5 or 6 investors that were the usual suspects that we thought we could talk to and get funding, they sort of can't do it. But let's just kind of stay the course and talk to a broader set of investors. So that was really our first first way of dealing with it. And we ended up meeting with a lot of different VC firms. There were a lot in 2008. I think possibly more than there are now, because a number of them actually went out of business during that time.
A calling of sorts.
Exactly. But we met with all of them, the ones that survived and the ones that got culled, if you will, and everyone was polite. Well, I should say most everyone was polite, and but it was just the psychology. People weren't making investments. So the thing that we started doing in parallel was talking to pharmaceutical companies, and this. It really started out as really just kind of a side thing. The vast majority of our focus was on those VC investors, and the pharma companies were kind of a side project or something we would do in between. But what we found was that I think a mistake was not shifting that focus sooner, because we found we were getting more traction with the pharma companies than we were with the VCs. They have a longer term perspective, and they're the large pharma. They're all public companies, so their stocks were getting better too, and the psychology was tough there too. But the difference is they, to survive, they need to keep going with their drug development, and they need to get get drugs on the market, and the demand for that is a little bit more consistent. So while they had that same psychology as the VCs in terms of being concerned about the environment, they still had sort of budget and a way to go forward. So I think over time, as we racked up a longer and longer list of no's from the VC investors, and started getting into more and more detailed conversations with pharma companies, increasingly it looked like that was the direction where we were getting more traction. So I think the mistake was just not shifting sooner, but I guess the lesson, or one of the takeaways would be that sort of having multiple paths in parallel is really important.
Yeah. And since then, the economy, obviously, it took a while to level off, and then it was relatively stable. We've seen some, even recently in the last 7 days, we've seen some interesting activity in the stock market. Yes. How did your strategy, how did it change over time? Like, as did you ever get comfortable? Let me ask you that. Did you ever get to a point where you're just like, hey, things have leveled off, we're comfortable, or was there sort of an always keep grinding mentality?
Yeah, and I think, I think having been founded and gone through that really difficult time in 2008, there was sort of never, as a company and sort of as a culture, it really made us feel like we could or should kind of rest on our laurels, if you will, or get comfortable. And at the time, we would actually tell ourselves, there were all these articles about how some of the greatest companies in the world and most enduring companies were founded during very difficult economic times, and we would read those articles and sort of tell ourselves that, and in part it just felt like just a way to make ourselves feel better about the situation. But in retrospect, I think there is some truth to that, because it's almost Darwinian. There's sort of a harsher selective pressure in difficult times, and it forces you to adapt faster to survive and really find where you can create the most value. And so I think that's really what happened with us. So, in order to get those pharma partners, we actually had to change our strategy. So originally, we were looking at predicting response to specific cancer immunotherapies. Actually, at the start, we were looking at interleukin-2, which was a therapy that worked very well in a very small subset of melanoma patients. And we said, if we can predict who's going to respond, that'll be good for patients, because then the ones who aren't going to respond don't have to suffer through all the toxicity of that treatment. And even more so, if we can understand why it's working, what's happening in that 7% that's having they're called complete and durable responses, we can figure out how to make that happen in more people. Mm-hmm. And so, but originally we were really focused on that one therapy, and what the pharma companies told us was, we don't really care about interleukin-2, but can you apply the same approach to our therapies, to the drugs that we're developing? And so I think that was another case where sort of being flexible was important, and I think we had to do it. The mistake was not doing it sooner, but the lesson is when we finally were able to shift a little bit, it was helpful, and so that's really how we got started, was doing services projects where we were helping bioinformatics services, helping pharma companies analyze their data to figure out why their successful drugs were working. Really what's the mechanism of action. So one of our very first projects was working with Bristol Myers Squibb on Yervoy, which is their anti-CTLA-4 antibody for melanoma, and now many other indications at the time melanoma. And it was really through the bioinformatics services that we were able to gain some insights into why some patients were responding better than others.
Yeah. Has it been a conscious strategy to take revenue from that bioinformatics services part of the business and reinvest it in developing your own pipeline?
Over time, yeah, that became a strategy, and look, it enabled us to really seed the drug development programs. So we, at first we were just the bioinformatics services, and then as we grew, we were able to develop a proprietary platform that lets us, through the services, we started noticing this common pattern among successful drugs, which is that they were, while they were all sort of designed to go after a single target, they were actually modulating hundreds, if not thousands, of genes, and upregulating some, downregulating others, and doing it in a way that specifically counteracted disease patterns. So literally, genes that were downregulated in a particular aspect of disease would be upregulated by the drug, and vice versa. So we built our proprietary platform, our disease-canceling technology, to really find new drugs to take advantage of that effect. So once we built that and validated that, initially we thought about applying it in a services model, and some of the initial responses we got when the platform was early was, well, if this is so great, why don't you if this is so great at finding drugs, why don't you find your own drugs?
Go find your own, yeah.
Yeah. And so we kind of ran the numbers and we said, yeah, why not? Good question. So that, to your point, we then use the balance sheet from the services business to seed those initial efforts to get drug programs up and running.
Yeah.
And that was actually worked out really well and enabled us to really demonstrate proof of concept experimentally, both for the platform and the specific drug candidates that came out of it. And it got us to the point where we were able to raise, when it got us to the point where we were able to raise capital, having really demonstrated the platform and have drug programs that were truly underway. So I think we're probably one of the few companies that raised a Series A after more than a decade in business. That's pretty unusual. But.
Yeah. The Business of Biotech podcast is dedicated to helping new and emerging biopharma leaders navigate the organizational, financial, and regulatory aspects of the biotherapeutics market landscape. So is Cytiva, the company formerly known as GE Healthcare Life Sciences, and the gracious underwriters of this project. Find out how Cytiva is helping life science researchers and biopharmaceutical manufacturers evolve how new therapies and precision medicines are discovered, made, and used at www.cytiva.com. That's www.cytiva.com. Yeah, it's unusual, and what also is unusual about your company is, and I think it's unfortunate that it's unusual, to be frank, is that granted, it's a very specific piece of intellectual property that you came to market with around bioinformatics, but the ability to leverage the IP that you have to build a different aspect of your business is something that I think is often overlooked especially in this space where you have companies that are led by very intelligent, vibrant, business savvy people who employ very talented people as well, and there's a lot of intellectual property in a company that goes untapped that could potentially parlay itself into a line of business that helps fund drug discovery.
That's right. Yeah, no, it's a great point, and we always we have a fantastic team. Half our team is trained at MIT, and the rest at kind of equally great institutions. The majority of I think of our 20 people, 17 are PhDs or MDs. So we really have a great team. So what we would do in the early days was kind of buffer capacity. So when the services work got a little slower, we'd have people work on internal drug programs, or building the platforms or the technology. And to your point, it really let us sort of start to seed these efforts that ultimately enabled us to add a second kind of pillar to our company. Of course, our services business is still thriving, and pretty much anyone who has RNA-seq or other exome, other bioinformatics data, we're able to really help them analyze it, get more out of it. But in parallel now, we have the drug programs which use the disease canceling technology. So yeah, it's been nice to be able to add that second kind of line of business. But it really does build on that original goal from day one, which is we were trying to understand existing drugs and how they worked well, so that we could get good responses in more patients. And so that there was always sort of this dream from the beginning of, could we use the insights that bioinformatics provides to create new medicines, and so it's it took a decade to get to that point, but I think our whole team is really excited that we have that running there.
You briefly touched on buffering capacity. I'd like to get your opinion or thoughts on other, I guess, organizational or structural levers that you can push and pull, and buttons you can depress to, I guess, react to, prepare for volatility, blips, right, in the economy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one is just simply capital efficiency, and going back to sort of great successful companies being started during difficult economic times. I think a big part of that is just the and I know this certainly for our company, capital efficiency is sort of burned deeply into our DNA as a company, and it's just. It really becomes cultural. So I'm not saying we're cheap. We take care of our employees, and we always spend money on important things like healthcare for our employees and things like that. But I think there's a lot of inefficiencies around how typical companies spend money, and when they're able to raise a really large Series A from day one, a lot of times just naturally that capital efficiency discipline doesn't really get instilled from the beginning. So, but for us, it was always there. It's reflected in ways like we used a lot of consultants in the early days as opposed to hiring full-time employees. Even to this day, we work with CROs a lot, and sort of only build capacity where we need it. And kind of when we need it, aside from kind of the core bioinformatics and computational biology, where we do, it's not even so much that we just sort of intentionally built excess capacity, but it's more just whenever we found really great, world-class, top-notch computational biologists, we sort of hired them, whether or not we had the demand at that moment. So yeah. People, I'd say, is the one place where we have really invested our capital in the early days. But
and that's
efficient. Yeah.
Yeah, I would assume that's a pretty. You've got to walk a fine line there, like you said. If you have an opportunity to bring on someone who's a real rock star in the space, you look at that from a corporate valuation standpoint. It could be a real boon to your valuation. At the same time, do you find that potential investors are paying attention to your capital efficiency, and perhaps their reaction to your efficiency or lack thereof may have an implication on your next round or your ability to secure funding the next time you need it?
I think different investors have different opinions on that, right? I mean, there's some investors that are sort of want to put a ton of money into something and just see it go as fast as it can, and either it takes off like a rocket ship or it crashes, and so and I think that's something for entrepreneurs to consider, is that not all investors believe in capital efficiency, if you, or they believe in it to differing extents. But certainly, for us, we're fortunate to find a group of investors that I think shares our philosophy and our vision. And I should mention that having that kind of burned into our DNA from the beginning was helpful in another way, which is that our platform, our disease canceling technology for finding new drug candidates, one of its key attributes, and we actually didn't really know this until we went back and kind of looked at our actual numbers to date, but it's actually much more capital efficient. So if you look at where our drug programs are today versus kind of the typical benchmarks for startups of this type, we're actually 3 times more capital efficient. So we spent a third of what it would take a typical startup to get there. And a lot of that is driven by the technology itself, because we're taking steps that are traditionally done through trial and error screening, and we're doing them computationally, and there's still experiments that are required, but they're much more focused experiments that are done at the end. So I think the cool thing about that is sort of our capital efficiency culture ultimately manifested itself in technology, which it's faster and it lets us find drugs that wouldn't be found by traditional methods, but it's also extremely capital efficient, which I'm excited about.
Very cool. I don't want to put you on the spot and necessarily ask you about your exit strategy. I'm not making any assumptions about where you are on that continuum. But as you look at the space and assuming that at your stage in the life cycle of your company, you've at least thought about an exit strategy. What do you see as sort of key indicators in the market around when a good time for an IPO might be, or when a good time to seek an acquisition might be? Like, do you see any indicators, like reductions in IPOs that you kind of pay attention to?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends a lot on the nature of the exit. And I should mention we actually had a nice partial exit along the way in 2015, where we sold part of our company to a large pharma company, and actually that was nice because all those investors who had said no to us in the early days actually kind of did us a favor, because it meant the founders and the team had a much greater ownership stake in the company when it came time for that partial exit. But when I think about the conditions leading to that, as well as kind of the environment now and how our company might go forward in the future, to me those exits are a lot more kind of relationship specific and situation specific than entirely driven by the economic climate. Now they're not. It's really both. They're kind of interwoven, right? So certainly the exit that we had, the company was doing the company that acquired part of our company was doing very well at the time. Their stock price was high, the markets were good. So I think that certainly helped them psychologically to want to move forward with a transaction. But we'd also been working with them for 2.5 years through our services business. So it's kind of like the world's longest due diligence period. They had seen firsthand how effective we were at bioinformatics. So I think it's really those two factors. It's kind of the general psychology of the markets and how that particular company is doing, and then the specifics of the relationship. And I think that's right too going forward. Obviously, so last week when the markets were plunging over the coronavirus fears, I don't think that was a time when anyone was really thinking of transactions or buying other companies or anything like that.
Right.
But hopefully that situation will stabilize, and I think as long as things are stable and people aren't worried about what will happen next, then exits are driven a lot by the specifics of the technology and the relationship. I mean, the nice thing that we have that gives us some kind of redundancy is we have this whole pipeline of different drug programs, and we're set up to take them to the clinic. We have a chief medical officer. We're working towards that. But actually, because of our capital efficiency, we could, if we got the right offer, license or partner one or more of the drug programs that are relatively early stage. So I think that gives us one opportunity to generate liquidity. The IPO market is certainly something to monitor and understand how companies in the industry are doing. That's always I think any company has to keep that in mind as a possibility at some point when the time is right. And then
sure. Yeah. So I'm a new CEO, right? First time CEO of an emerging biopharma company. What sort of inside dope can you give me on investors' mentalities, during times of volatility, bubble, potential volatility?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's challenging. I mean, I think I would say pursue investors, but also try to have some other plans that you can pursue in parallel, like for us, the pharma companies. But in terms of when people will make the decision to invest, even in difficult times, I think it's really around risk and reward, right? And if anything that you can do as a CEO to de-risk your company, show that your technology has been validated, you have good partnerships, you have great employees, all of these factors, publications when you can, all this kind of helps to de-risk your company, and then on the flip side, the reward, just show that the market that you're in is really large, the kind of the potential is that we talk about even today with our services business, the business is thriving just through word of mouth. So and there's just the pace at which gene expression and sequencing data is being generated is only increasing. So it's just really a vast market. So make points like that where that just show the the upside and the potential reward from your company. We talk about our drug programs, each of which is in a multi-billion-dollar market. So I think showing that upside, that reward is really important. And if you can successfully make the case that your company is lower risk than kind of the other opportunities that they're seeing and higher reward, investments get made even in difficult times.
Excellent. Very good. So that'd be a good place to end, but I want to give you the opportunity to offer up a concluding thought, if you'd like. You're talking to, Ben, I'm going to guess you're 31 years old.
Oh, I'm flattered. 38 actually.
Okay, so
Thank you for the compliment. Thank you for the
sure.
compliment.
If 38-year-old Ben had the opportunity to give a sound piece of funding advice to, let's say, 28-year-old Ben, what would it be?
I think just balance, persistence, and flexibility. I think that's it. I think you have to keep moving and stay true to your goals, and yet be really flexible to the environment. I learned to sail at MIT in little dinghy boats, and I used to teach sailing lessons there. And when you sail, you can always get to whatever destination you want to go to, but how you get there depends on the wind. So when the wind is coming straight from the direction you want to go, you can't sail directly upwind. Your sails start luffing. But what you have to do is tack. You have to zigzag essentially, and you can get to where you want to go. So the wind is the economic conditions, right? Don't try to sail directly upwind, but stay persistent in getting to your goal, but just do it in a more flexible way. Sometimes you have to turn turn the boat in a different direction to ultimately get to where you want to go.
Yeah, very good. It was a beautiful analogy. Great way to end it. Ben Zeskind, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. Great conversation.
Matt, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. That's Ben Zeskind. I'm Matt Pillar, and this is the Business of Biotech, produced by Bioprocess Online and graciously supported by Cytiva, formerly GE Healthcare Life Sciences. Tune in next week for a great conversation with Vivek Ramaswamy on building your biotech all-star team. In the meantime, please subscribe, give us 5 stars, and be sure to subscribe to our newsletter at bioprocessonline.com. Thanks for listening.